Today I'm going to be sharing 10 of my most hardy houseplants. These are plants that always make it through the winter, and yeah, they're just really low maintenance and really easy care. First we have the Easter cactus, and this one is a really easy care plant. Not only does it flower, it also looks really cool when it's not flowering. And I've had this one for a couple of years and it's never ever caused me any problems. And it even continues to grow throughout the winter too. It's always putting out new leaves. And even though this one is a jungle cactus, so it does require watering a little more than your ordinary cactus, it is a plant that really does well with neglect. It's one of those plants that you can just leave it be, and if you forget to water it for a few weeks, it's absolutely fine. And the thing I really love about this one is that when it's thirsty, it actually shows you in its leaves. You can see them become kind of crinkly, and that's usually when I water mine. When I see that the leaves have started to go a little bit wrinkly, that's always a really good sign that this one needs a drink. Because this one's a jungle cactus, it's also absolutely fine with a little bit less light than your average desert cactus, so that makes this plant even more fuss-free. Next up is the jade plant, and I've personally had this plant in my collection for a few years now, probably more like 4 actually, maybe even longer. This is one of the plants that I've had for the longest out of all the plants in my collection. This one started out as a tiny little baby, and as you can see, it's grown really well. So I've had this one through a number of winters, and yeah, it's just a really easy care plant. I barely water mine through the winter, and this one also is really good at telling you when it needs a drink because the leaves start to become kind of dehydrated. But there's been lots of times when I've forgotten about my jade plant and it just always bounces back absolutely fine. It's one of the easiest plants you could possibly get, and I even leave mine on the same windowsill that it lives in during summer, during winter, and it does get quite cold there, and yeah, it's never had a problem. It just stops growing during winter and then it always starts growing again like clockwork come spring. Next is another jungle cactus, and I really love jungle cactuses. This one is the fishbone cactus, and yeah, this one's really cool. It's got kind of serrated leaves, and again, because this is a jungle cactus, it's far more adaptable than desert cactuses. So this one can actually withstand a little bit less light. And I think I'm going through my second winter with this one now. It gets through the winter really, really easily. It even puts out some new growth as well. And I've definitely found this to be a really rewarding and low maintenance plant. I could highly recommend this. It's also really low cost as well. And as I say, it's so adaptable with its conditions that it can stand to. So you can put it in a higher light situation, you can put it in a slightly lower light situation, and it's really adaptable. And yeah, I'd highly recommend this one. If you're one of those people that just likes to forget about your plants and you don't have a great deal of time to be fussing over them, this is definitely a winner for you. Next up we have the bird of paradise. This one is one of the easiest plants I have. This one actually has really tuberous roots, so it can withstand quite a lot of drought. So if you forget to water it, or you accidentally neglect it, or you're one of those people that just goes away a lot, this is a really good option for you. It can definitely withstand drought, and it can withstand colder conditions during the winter. Mine has made it through the winter a couple of times now, and yeah, it's always been one of those plants that just never causes any trouble. It doesn't lose its leaves. It does stop growing during winter, it kind of goes into dormancy, but come spring it starts putting out those leaves again. And yeah, this one definitely is one of the easiest plants you could get your hands on. Mine is still a baby at the moment, but these actually do get really huge, so if you want one of these, make sure you have a lot of space for it to grow into. I've also found this plant to be really pest resistant too. It's been in contact with other plants that have pests, and I've never had pests on this one. I'm not sure why, maybe they don't like it, but it does seem like a really strong, healthy plant, and yeah, it's always good when they don't cause any fuss. This is definitely one of those plants that creates that jungle look, and as I say, as it gets larger, you can have it as a floor plant. Next up is the dragon tree, and I've had this one for years. There are actually 3 plants in this pot. It started out as just one and then I added 2 more to it. But this one again is really pest resistant. This one was actually right next to another plant that had thrips and it didn't get thrips. So for some reason, pests don't seem to like it, and it's also really adaptable. As I say, I've had this for a few years now, and yeah, it's just absolutely fine during winter. It just requires a little less watering, as most plants do during winter, but this one is also really adaptable light-wise. It will be happy in higher light situations, but I've also found it to be really happy in low light situations too. And yeah, I just really enjoy how this one grows. It has really cool shaped foliage, and this is one of those plants that kind of is always in the background that I really love. It's one of my kind of staple plants, and I'd highly recommend this one. Again, you can let it dry out completely and it's absolutely fine, and then you just water it when it's dry. But if you forget to water it for a few weeks, it's absolutely fine. It's one of those survivors of the plant world. Next up is the umbrella plant, and I've had this one for a few years now. The first year I had it, it kind of took a little bit of time to get going, but in the second year it started growing really well for me, and yeah, this one grows really fast. It's actually needed repotting a lot of times this year. I've personally found that this one is really good at withstanding cold temperatures, and even when I have the window open, it doesn't mind. As I say, I've had this one for at least 3 winters now, and it just seems to be one of the most easy and fuss-free plants that you could possibly get your hands on. And it looks really cool too. It kind of grows into a miniature kind of tree form. This one has definitely fast become one of my favourite plants, and it's one of those ones that again just doesn't seem to get pests. I've never had pests on this one, even when it's been in the same room as pests. It's just been such a joy to have, and yeah, I'd highly recommend it if you are a beginner, or even if you're not a beginner and you're just looking for plants that aren't going to require a lot of fuss and a lot of attention. This one is fine with drying out. I let it dry out all the way, and again I can kind of tell when it needs watering now because I've had it for so long. The leaves start to look a little bit dull, and it just kind of gives me signs that it needs water. Next up is the snake plant, and I've had snake plants for a number of years now. They never ever suffer during winter. They are probably one of the most hardy houseplants that you could get hold of, and that goes for all types of snake plants too, not just this one. So these guys are really good at drought. They are fine if you want to leave a lot of time between watering. If you go away a lot, it's fine to leave them for a few weeks without water. Especially during winter, they tend to need watering far less during winter, and you will want to be careful about overwatering in winter because they do need less water. So make sure you check that soil before you water them. They also are absolutely fine with cooler temperatures. Even though these are generally sun-loving plants, they're also really adaptable, so they are known for being adaptable for low light situations, but also temperature-wise, they never skip a beat really. I've had them in colder temperatures, warmer temperatures, and nothing really changes. They're also another really good plant for being pest resistant. I don't think I've ever had pests on a snake plant. I'm sure it's possible, but again, my snake plants, they just seem to do their thing and they never cause me any trouble, and I really like plants like that because it makes the houseplant hobby a lot more enjoyable. So next is the rubber plant, and this goes for any type of rubber plant. This is the Ficus Belize Ruby, which has a bit of a red tinge to it, but all rubber plants are super hardy, and yeah, I've been keeping rubber plants for a number of years now, and they always make it through the winter just fine, and they don't tend to grow in winter. They kind of go dormant in that respect, but they don't suffer either. I've never had cold damage on a rubber plant, and again, these are seriously adaptable. They will adapt to most lighting situations, and yeah, they do like to kind of be neglected a bit. You can just let them dry out completely, and that is actually what they like. You do want to let them dry out, so if you're one of those kind of neglectful plant parents and you don't want to devote a lot of time to your plants, rubber plants are really good choices. So next up we have the yucca. The yucca is one of those true survivors of the plant world. They are super hardy, and you really can't go wrong with one of these. Not only do they look really tropical, but they really do thrive on neglect, and you can just leave them to do their thing, water them when they're completely dry, and they grow really well. As with most plants, they do prefer bright indirect light, but they are also really adaptable, which is why they're so good for beginners, because no matter where you place them really, they're going to be just fine. They do get a little bit more leggy in lower light situations, but that's the same with all plants really. But this one is really low maintenance. It's a really good space filler too if you're looking for a tropical plant to kind of junglify your home, which is basically what we're all after, isn't it? So yeah, definitely recommend the yucca if you are after a winter hardy house plant. Next up we have the corn plant, and this is probably top of the list when it comes to hardy houseplants. I've had this one for years. I just bought another one recently because this plant, not only is it great with withstanding any temperature, it makes it through the winter absolutely fine. I've never had cold damage. It continues to grow, and yeah, it's just a really hardy plant. This one is also really awesome at adjusting to different lighting situations. So a lot of plants, they don't really thrive in low light, but I do find that this one does fine in low light, and this is basically the only plant that I keep in low light because of that, because I've had experience of it for a few years now. I know that it's going to do fine. It's one of those kind of background filler plants that not many people really talk about, but it's a really cool plant, and they're also not very expensive either. These are not only good for keeping in your home, but they're also really good office plants if you need a plant in your office, because as I say, they are seriously hardy and they really do want to survive. So they will survive pretty much most conditions you put them under. Just don't forget to water them now and again. Next up is basically any kind of epipremnum. This is the Epipremnum Marble Queen, but they are all just as hardy over winter, and yeah, they're just brilliant plants. They do tend to continue growing during winter too, which is really good because a lot of my plants don't, and so it's kind of nice when I have one or two here and there that do. But any Epipremnum will be hardy enough to make it through the winter. They don't even mind if the temperature gets a bit cooler, if they accidentally get left by a window or something like that. These plants really are survivors, and again, the care that I do for this one is to just let it dry out completely, and as with the other plants in this list, this one also thrives pretty well on neglect too. So yeah, just bear in mind that with the variegated versions of this plant, you will want to give the variegated versions more light because they will lose their variegation if you don't. But with the ones that aren't variegated, the solid green ones, those ones can just survive basically any lighting situation. So yeah, Epipremnum is definitely a genus of plant that will survive the winter and beyond. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really hope you enjoyed the video. You may also enjoy this video here, and I'll see you in the next video.